I'm going to talk in this video about what happens to student loans after you die or after a family member dies. I think obviously this is something that I hope never happens to you, that you never have to think about, but I think it's also a little bit of a peace of mind to understand what does occur and then just to be just prepared for all the different eventualities that could happen. So I'm going to show you in this video why in most cases you do not need to worry about student loans for your family if something happens to you or if something happens to a family member, and I'm going to show you why. So federal student loans are always forgiven. So luckily, any kind of like Parent Plus or Stafford loans or Grad Plus loans, they are always forgiven, and the forgiveness is also tax free. So it was a big change in the law, I think around 2017, that made death discharge for student loan debt tax free. There was another law that got passed in 2021, American Rescue Plan, that basically made forgiveness of any kind tax free until the end of 2025. But this is doubly tax-free in the sense that there's two different laws that make it really clear to Congress that this is not supposed to be a taxable event. So that is a really good thing, that federal student loans are always forgiven upon the death of the borrower, the student in the case of Parent Plus, and then discharge for student loan debt from due to death is also a tax-free event, which is something that you don't have to worry about affecting your family with. Now, if you have federal student loans, it's more straightforward. If you have private student loans, it's not necessarily quite as straightforward. So private student loans, all of the major student loan companies that you've heard of, right, like SoFi, Earnest, etc., those places all forgive debt due to death of the borrower. Now, the issue is there's a lot of different kinds of student loan lenders out there. There are some, small credit unions and such that might lend to people for undergrad and things like that. So it's not necessarily a guarantee that all private lenders, there's no law that requires private lenders to forgive student debt due to death that I'm aware of, at least. So, what happens is you have to kind of treat private student loan debt as if it could be due upon your death. Now, if you have the private student loans, there's a pretty straightforward way to think about this. If you're single and you have private student loans and something happens to you, no one's on the hook, right? No one's on the hook. So you wouldn't need to worry about that or protect against it. Now, if you have a family and you have private student loans, what you would probably want to do is get term life insurance. Now, you should have term life insurance anyway if you have a family, probably, if you have dependents especially. And so what you could do is just add on roughly the amount of your private student loan debt on top of the term life policy you were going to buy anyway. So if you have $100,000 of student loan debt and you were going to buy a $1 million term policy, you might as well just round up and say, 1.1 or 1.25. Usually people think about term life insurance in terms of like every $250,000 because it's just fairly cheap coverage to buy in the first place, right? So private student loans, if you have them or if a family member has them, it's not a bad idea if the premium isn't very high to just get an extra term life policy to cover it. Now, usually for student loans, for federal student loans, it's always forgiven if someone dies. But usually for private student loans, spouses are not on the hook for debt. So that's number 4. In rare cases, there might be some community property states where possibly, debt could be something that would be potentially subject to probate. It just depends, right? So I think that the key point there is, if you want to make absolutely sure that that student debt does not affect your family, that's why that term life insurance is very helpful. Now, if you have a situation where somebody has co-signed your student loans, so I've got some good news from that regard. So co-signers are protected from having to pay back student debt in the event of the death of the person they co-signed for. This is due to this law called the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act of 2018. And so what happens is any private student loans that are issued after 2018 have this protection by law where, you are done if something happens to the primary borrower that borrowed the loans that you co-signed for, you do not have to pay those loans back. However, before 2018, if you took out a private student loan and co-signed before 2018, it's going to be lender by lender specific, right? So there's theoretically a case where you could be on the hook to pay back that student debt if your loan was from before 2018. So in almost every case, you either don't have to worry about federal student loans if something happens to you, and for private student loans, if you're a young borrower, just get some term life insurance if you're worried about anybody else being affected. But the good news is that they probably will not be affected. And, I really hope you never have to think about this or deal with this, but I hope this video gives you peace of mind that student loan debt is not something that you have to worry about. Take away the fear, take away the anxiety, the stress, It's not something that you have to worry about something that you did that's going to hurt you or your family. Okay, so if you're at all struggling, please know that student debt is always fixable. There's never a situation where you're in too far deep to be able to get help. So just please comment if you need anything. Please comment if you need any encouragement. Student loan debt is always a fixable problem compared to some things out there that aren't fixable. And so that's good news. So student loan debt should not affect your anxiety. It should not affect your stress levels. And if it is, then there's solutions out there. So just know that, and know that student loan debt, for the most part, does not have to be something that affects your family if something ever happens to you.